Om. Om. ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् ॐ गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः ॐ सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणि विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा कार्पण्यदोषोपहत स्वभावः पृच्छामि त्वां धर्मसम्मूढचेताः यश्श्रेयस्यानिश्चितं ब्रूहि तन्मे शिष्यस्तेऽहं शाधि मां त्वां प्रपन्नम् ॐ वाङ्मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविर्मयेधि वेदस्य म आणिस्तः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासिः अनेन अधीतेन अहोरात्रान् सन्ददामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मा अवतु तद्वक्तारम् अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयामदेवाः भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गै स्तुष्ट्वाग्वं स्वस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव कीर्तिपृष्ठं गिरेरिव विभो पवित्रो वाजिनीव सुममृतम् अस्मि द्रविडगुं सवर्चसं सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः इति त्रिशङ्कुर्वेदानुवचनम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः नारायण नारायण एवरीवन
Narayan, Narayan.
Narayan, Narayan.
All right. We have covered till Shloka 12 in the last class. So basically, everything that we do in our lives is to be placed in three categories and three categories alone. Yajna, Dan, Tap. एक सेकेंड ना आपका क्या रूम से मेरे को Are you hearing any echo? अच्छा. Okay. So everything has to be in three categories: यज्ञ, दान, तप. तो अभी हम लोग यज्ञ समझ रहे हैं. What are the three categories of yajna, right? After this, we will do the other categories as well to understand, and that's how we will understand how faith, like we said right in the beginning of the chapter, that faith determines an individual. So now we'll see how it affects an individual, because every aspect of our life is determined by our faith. How we act, what we do, how we think, everything gets determined by the faith that we hold. So starting with yajna, dan, tap, yaad rakhne. Yajna, dan, tap, everything in our life is one of these three categories only: yajna, dan, tap. So yajna is all actions we take. Right? Every action that we take in our life can be a yajna or it cannot be a yajna, right? So if we do it appropriately, it is actually a yajna. So when we do any action which is in accordance with the duties that have been prescribed to us, right? And duties change with phase of life, with the ashram of life. So when we do actions that are in accordance with scriptures, in accordance with swadharm, not pardharm, right? Not somebody else's duty. We are doing our own duty. So swadharm, and being done with complete dedication and devotion to the Lord, right? The ultimate purpose of such a duty or performance of such actions is only to please Bhagwan Ji. It is not to please somebody else. It is not to please my kids. It is not to please my in-laws or my parents or my kid or other people, for my boss. These are to be done only to please Bhagwan Ji with his resources and having zero attachment to the results. Such a yajna is a sattvic yajna. But when you do exactly the same type of actions, all scripturally correct actions, but they are done with a sakam bhav, meaning when you do it for a certain worldly end goal, when you are attached to the end results, right? In that case, the same yajna becomes a rajasic yajna. So your actions are correct. Your actions are in accordance with your phase of life. They are in accordance with the scriptural commandments, but you're attached to the end results. And that actually is the case with most of us, that we will end up doing the right things, the good things, but we lose the opportunity to get the highest return of life, the highest gain of life, the ultimate welfare, because we get attached to petty things of, petty worldly things. It could be whatever, like material desires or fame or respect or whatever, right? That we get attached to. All of it, and through all of this, what are we doing? We are doing not Bhagwan ji ki seva. Rajasic, sattvic tap mein we do Bhagwan ji ki seva. In Rajasic tap, we do ego की सेवा, है ना? इसके बाद if you are today doing Rajasic yajna in any part of your life, the moment you take out attachment to the end goals, right, and you dedicate the results to Bhagwan Ji, it becomes a Sattvic yajna. Then now we're going to read about the features of the Tamasic yajna. Prem, do you want to read with us?
Sure. Describing the features of Tamasic Yagna, the Lord says,
Vidhihinam
Vidihinam
asrishtanam
Asrishtanam
mantrahinam adakshinam
Mantrahinam Adakshiham
Shraddha virahitam yajnam
Shraddha Vritam Yagnam
tamasam parichakshate.
Tamasamam Parachakshate. A yagna is spoken of as a tamasic if it is contrary to the scriptural prescriptions, is unaccompanied by offering of food or chanting of mantras and offerings to priests, and also without faith. Tamasic yagna. Such a yagna is performed without faith and contrary to spiritual injunctions, and only as a social practice in imitation of others. It is possible that the observance of scriptural injunctions may be neglected due to ignorance. This fault is remediable by intensity of faith, but a deliberate flouting of such injunctions make the yagna tamasic. The mantras are imbued with extraordinary divine power, and so wholehearted chanting of the mantras make the yagna highly effective. Offering of food includes sharing of other necessities of life also, like clothing and shelter. The total effect of all these is the genuine feeling of welfare of all. Similarly, the priest presiding over the yagna should be of some money with humility and not with a spirit of bargaining or of that conceit. Absence of these features make the yagna tamasic.
So, yagna is, let's recap, right? Sattvic yagna is all about giving up your ego. It's all about offering something to Bhagwan Ji, right? So in Sattvic yagna, it's about giving up your sense of doership and your sense of ego and offering gratefulness, right? In Rajasic yagna, you are doing everything with the right bhav, but you're not giving up ego. You're basically doing it for worldly desire, asking for things in return, right? So that also creates bondage. In Tamasic, you're doing it just for the sake of doing it, because others are doing it, so you're doing it. And they've highlighted four elements: offering of food, chanting of mantras, offering to priests, and without faith. So, faith we understand is at the bhav level, is the reverence, is gratefulness. That is the faith, right? Offering to priests is a form of surrendership. It's a form of lowering yourself and acknowledging the priests for and suspending your ego to their reverence, right? Mantra is important because that is the way to call God within yourself, the energy that you give, right? And that is imbued with the right faith. And then offering of food is important because that prasad that we get back nourishes the right energy. When we eat the prasad, it's not just eating sweets, it's not just offering food. It is when you actually chew and that food becomes energy in your body. It is giving energy to your divine. It's giving energy to your divine qualities. That is what you're asking for. Without all of this, you're basically, what a tamasic yagna is basically doing it for the sake of doing it. You're doing it because others are doing it. You're doing it with the flow, but you don't have any proper bhav, or you're doing it because you want to see the temple from the inside. Oh my God, there's so much gold, and all of those elements that come in. Yeah. So now you'd like to add?
Yeah. So in a tamasic yagya, there is going to be complete carelessness of actions. In general, there is going to be, there are ways in which a certain thing should be done. When you are doing an activity in a tamasic bhav, you will not be careful about the way things are done. You're very careless about the process. You're not going to be detail oriented at all, right? क्योंकि हम खाना पूर्ति कर रहे हैं. We're just doing things for the sake of doing them, as Abhinav said, right? So there is complete carelessness about the process. You're not detail oriented. You don't care about this being detail oriented. And there is no reverence for the resources that are being used in the yagya. So whatever objects you're using, when we are doing a sattvic yagya, there is always a lot of reverence for everything that is used, all the resources that are used, right? You have full reverence towards them. Even in Rajasic yagya, in certain cases, you will have reverence. In case of Tamasic yagya, there is no reverence at all. Now, when there is no reverence at all, then a lot of things happen. One, you are going to waste resources because there is no reverence for it, right? You're like, for example, you're doing something in which, we're doing class here, right? And for this class to happen, there are a lot of things that need to be right. For example, I need to have light here, right? When I don't have reverence for electricity, we're going to waste electricity. We're going to waste water, right? Brush karte hue pani chale ja raha hai, chale ja raha hai. This is a tamasic form of action because there is no reverence. रिसोर्स है हमारे पास, हम पे कर सकते हैं. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है दैट वी विल वेस्ट द रिसोर्सेज, राइट? व्हेन वी आर इन तामसिक भाव, वी डोंट केयर. आई कैन पे, हाउ डज इट मैटर, right? So we waste resources, we misuse resources, we misuse things that are there in our that we are supposed to be using in the yagya. And so these are things that regularly make any yajna tamasic. And we can see lots of examples of this in our lives when we think of it from this perspective, where we don't have reverence for the resources. And when we do it for the sake of doing it, as Abhinav said, because others are doing it, so I'm doing it. And lastly, when we don't take proper care when we are doing something, right? We are being careless in our actions. Um, in all of this, when he's talking about yagya, right? Bhagwan Ji is focusing on what? What is Krishna Ji telling us? He's saying that the focus is not on the actions itself. The focus is on the bhav. The focus is on the being, the way of being. If our way of being is sattvic or rajasic or tamasic, the actions that flow from it naturally become so. So we have to constantly focus on our way of being. Make sense? Okay, now we'll move on. Nena, do you want to read this?
Now the Lord takes up the three types of austerities or tapas. Self-denial is the essential constituent of all types of tapas. In its general form, tapas consist of a cheerful acceptance of mental and physical strain undergone in the performance of a righteous duty, undertaken in a yoga discipline. As such, it is ultimately connected with actions performed in pursuance of duty for self realization. Such actions may be physical, mental, or verbal. Accordingly, the self denial also pertains to the seeds of these three types of actions: body, mind, and speech, and in each it reflects the three types of faith. The Lord first takes up the austerity of the body.
देव द्विज गुरु प्राज्ञा
Deva Dvijaguru Prajna
पूजनम शौचम आर्जवम
Pujanam Shauchamarjavam
ब्रह्मचर्य अहिंसा च
Brahmacharya Ahimsa Cha
शारीरम तप उच्यते.
Shariram Tapa Uchyate. Worship of gods, Dvijas, preceptors, and the perceivers of reality, as also purity, straightforwardness, chastity, non injury, constitutes the austerity of the body. Austerity of the body. The various terms used in the shloka are explained below. Gods. This word indicates those powers which are incessantly engaged in dispensing divine bounties for the welfare of beings, having a feeling of veneration and gratitude for them, and also desisting from activities which run counter to such a dispensation, constitutes worship of the gods. Dvijas. The word Dvija means twice born. It is said that every human being first first birth is from parents who give birth to the physical body. The second birth is of the spirit when one receives moral instructions from a preceptor. So the word Dvija signifies a person who is morally evolved. Worship of such a person would mean service rendered to provide a dignified existence. Preceptor. This would mean a person who accepts the responsibility of guiding a seeker on the path of spiritual evolution. Perceivers of reality. This would mean saints and seers. Their worship means service to them so that they may be able to engage themselves in the full realization of truth. Purity. This entails keeping the body clean. Chastity, the word brahmacharya used in the shloka signifies chastity of behavior and thoughts, which is so necessary for the contemplation of the divine. Non-injury. This signifies a mode of conducting oneself so that no hurt may be caused to anyone but by any action of the body, mind, and also by speech.
So now that we've covered yagya, we're now going to explore tap. Tap is an extremely important aspect for us to cut out our prarabdha. तप तप जब भी होता है, तप will always involve some kind of friction, right? Because we are going to go against our likes and dislikes in case of tap. Tap always involves discipline, and discipline necessarily means that we will have to rise above our likes and dislikes. So when we are going to go against our man, when we are going to go against the whole, the natural flow of man, which is always towards likes and dislikes, there is going to be friction. And that friction generates heat. The heat of tap is what cleanses our antakaran. So tap is very, very important. And self-denial, it says, self-denial is essential constituent. What is the self-denial? It is rising above likes and dislikes. That is what is self-denial. ये करने का मन है तो हम और कर रहे हैं, ये नहीं मन है तो नहीं कर रहे हैं, है ना? So self-denial from that perspective, rising above likes and dislikes is what is being referred to here. So tap only happens when whatever we are doing, we do it cheerfully. And whatever pain has to be undergone when we do something, it has to be done cheerfully. If we are not doing it cheerfully, gratefully, तो वो तप नहीं है. So for example, I have to cook food. अब मैं अगर गुस्से में और अनहैप्पी होकर मैं कुक कर रही हूँ, तो वो तप नहीं है. काम तो किया, उतना ही एफर्ट लगा, बट वो सब ताम से काम हो गया. It is not, it has to be done cheerfully, happily and gratefully. Fast कर रहे हैं, okay, and I've denied myself food entire day. If I'm upset throughout the day and I'm questioning ये क्यों हो रहा है, किस लिए करना है, मेरे को क्यों कहा गया है, ये अनुष्ठान मुझे क्यों कहा गया करने को, मुझे नहीं करना है ये अनुष्ठान. When I'm in that space of mind, that's not your tap. Tap has to be done in a space of cheerfully accepting that thing कि ये मेरे लिए बहुत अच्छा है. Now, if my man is going to rail against this tap, खाने की या तप या जो भी आपने अपने लिए तप किया है, whatever you have decided to do, if your mind rails against it, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing for me to find out why or how is my mind working. It gives me an opening to understand myself. So tap has to be done with that perspective, cheerfully grateful for the seva that has been given to me for my own antakaran ki shuddhi. That's the only purpose for everything that comes in my life, every VVGP. And when I do it with this attitude कि कितना भी मुश्किल हो, कितना भी आसान हो, जो भी कुछ हो, I'm doing it gratefully, happily, cheerfully, तो वो तप will generate the right type of energy which will do antakaran ki shuddhi. It will move me towards my ultimate welfare. Now there are 3 types of tap. There is physical, mental and verbal, associated with the body, mind and speech. So we're going to now go through each of those aspects. So the first is the austerity of the body itself, which is, I would say, the easiest of them all, because it is the grossest. So it's defined here as worship of gods, dvijas. So gods is what? Gods are basically Bhagwan ji ki powers, manifested powers, right? Bhagwan ji, as we know, is all encompassing. Now, one part of him causes the wind to blow. One part of him causes the light, which allows us to see. One part of him gives us the light and warmth. One part of him gives us all other aspects of life, right? And hamara jo in our culture, we basically have these gods for everything in our lives, right? हर जगह देवों का स्थान होता है. And when you think of it like that, connecting it back to the previous shloka, you will have a huge amount of reverence for everything you do. Because every action we take, which is basically yagya, in yagya, all the resources we use, each of them will have their own dev. And when each of them has its own god, then before you use that resource, you're mentally praying to that god. And you're being grateful to that god for allowing you to use that resource. And then when you approach something with that reverence, there is no way that you will end up misusing it in any fashion, right? You will always try and leave things better than what you got them as. Can you see that connection? Right? So naturally, your yajna will be sattvic. Naturally, your tap will be sattvic. So everything has its god. And when we start something, we thank everything. Every god is thanked. That's how a yajna starts. And you will have gods for directions, you will have god for winds, all natural resources that you can think of. You have gods for like your own house, कहते हैं घर के जो भगवान जी होते हैं, स्थान जहाँ हम बैठे हैं देव स्थान कहते हैं, स्थान के आपके भगवान जी होते हैं. So it is that level of reverence that when you get up and you put your feet on the ground, you will be grateful to the goddess of earth, who is, जैसे कहते हैं आपका भार बेयर कर रही हैं, राइट? शी इज टेकिंग योर वेट ऑल थ्रू द डे. So you will start with that level of reverence.
So,
This is called, this is how we pray to gods.
So I just want to add something to make this slightly easier. So body, we all have got a body for what reason? To do karma, so that we can get rid of our prarabdha and our past. So here, when they're talking about body, it's about the karma that we do with this body. So as Tuina mentioned, if we're just doing the karma for the sake of our likes and dislikes, as Tuina mentioned, then that is not sattvic tap. The sattvic tap only happens when we use the body, invoking his will and doing it for his pleasure. So when you look at this shloka for all of these things, like the second thing, which is dvija, like Tuina will go through it, think of it as the karma that you do with this body. And how do we do it? Because that is the purpose of why we've been given this body. Do karma and to do seva. Sorry, Tuina, please.
Correct. I think the other thing is that gods also represent not just, when I was giving examples, right? I give examples of all physical aspects, right? Resources, physical resources. But they are also, the gods are responsible or are placed in all the qualities. You remember we read these 26 divine qualities, right? Those 26 divine qualities come from where? Divine qualities come from Bhagwanji. So each of those is a form of Bhagwanji. So when we say that worship of gods, first of all, if you remember back, worship is what? Worship is not कि खड़े होके आप पूजा कर ली ऐसे, right? Worship really means that you have veneration for that god, for that person, and where real worship involves you trying to imbibe the qualities of the worshipped. So you have to try and become your worshipped. Then that worship of the worshipper is correct. The worshipper tries to become a clone of the worshipped. That is worship. If we are not doing that, then we are not really truly doing the worship. So if you are on the right path and you're living the right life and you're on and your ultimate goal is to be Bhagwanji, then worship must be that of the ideals too. You must have full veneration for these principles. And if you have veneration for the principles, that means you must try and inculcate them in your life as well. If that is not the bhav, so we are not on the right track, essentially. Okay? Then the second part is Dvij. Dvij, like they said, Dvij is the person who's our guru. Guru is the Dvij. And it is not teacher. राइट? इट्स नॉट टीचर। टीचर आपको ज्ञान देते हैं, मतलब वो पढ़ाते हैं, वो आपको चीजें बताएंगे। दिस इज अ गुरु इज somebody जो आपका कंप्लीट, यू हैव कंप्लीट सरेंडर ऑफ योर ईगो टू योर गुरु, एंड ही इज योर moral preceptor. Moral preceptor, he is the person who will give us the second birth. So Dvij here means the person who will give us that second life, right? And the second life is जब हमको actually में ज्ञान मिलता है, then we are truly awake. इससे पहले तो सो रहे होते हैं. So and when we say we are going to do पूजा ऑफ द द्विज, पूजा ऑफ द गुरु, मतलब जो गुरु ने कहा वो आपको करना है. सो दैट इज द तप. एंड ऑब्वियसली उसमें तप तो होगा, राइट? पूजा ऑफ द गॉड्स और वर्शिप ऑफ द द्विजास, देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ तप इन्वॉल्व. सो दिस इज ऑफ फिजिकल तप. देन अगर 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 योर गुरु टेल्स यू कि आपको सुबह 4 बजे उठ के ये कुछ काम करना है, देन द पर्सन हैज टू डू दैट. You have to wake up at 4 a.m. You have to do this, whatever. If he says give up something in your life, you have to give it up. That is the kind of stuff we are talking about, right? The third one is preceptor. So preceptor uh, is a level lower than Dvij. Dvij is somebody who is like, it's the guru. Preceptor is somebody who is guiding you on this path, right? And he will take the full responsibility of guiding you on that path. मतलब अगर वो आपको guide कर रहे हैं, like your teacher in your school has decided that he's taking on the responsibility of guiding you through the syllabus, then your natural तप is that when whatever teacher tells you कि ये करना है, ये करना है, ये पढ़ाई करनी है, इतना करना है, ये आपको इतना रिविजन करना है, ये होमवर्क करना है, you have to do that, right? Otherwise you are getting in the way of that person's duty as well. खुद का तो आपको जो अपना वो करना ही है, ऊपर से पाप और लगता है कि यू आर गेटिंग इन द वे ऑफ डूइंग समवन एल्स डूइंग देयर ड्यूटी. Then the perceivers of reality, the saints and the seers. So these saints and seers are people who will come in our lives, right? They may not be um, constantly involved with your life, right? But everywhere you have seers and seekers, they will touch you in different ways. For example, so many seers will touch us through the works that they have done, and when we read those books, or when we hear of them, or when we listen to bhajans that they have created, or we experience an art form that they have created, as an example, right? These are all ways saints and seers touch us and come into our lives. So we have to provide worship to them as well. There has to be full feeling of reverence towards them, and providing service to them would mean any kind of मतलब पहले तो we have to talk about them in a very respectful fashion. हम वो भी नहीं करते हैं. That's a very base level of worship, right? Purity. Purity would mean keeping the body clean. Now, keeping the body clean meaning inside and outside. नॉट जस्ट कि अच्छे से धो लिया, साबुन लगा लिया, खूब सारा परफ्यूम लगा लिया, खूब सारा क्रीम लगा लिया, राइट? दैट वी ऑल डू, right, at the grossest level. But also keeping the body clean in terms of what we eat and drink. What do you put inside it? है ना? We keep making it dirty with the wrong type of food, and we keep making it bloated and sick. So purity is very important when we consider what type of food we eat, at what time we eat, how much we eat, right? That is part of keeping the body clean. Chastity means chastity of behavior and thoughts. Not just behavior, also thoughts. How we think, what we think. Gossip हमको नहीं करनी है, पर अपने दिमाग में भी दूसरों के बारे में नेगेटिव नहीं सोचना है ना? Every person, then the question, a lot of people will go like, oh, but that person is actually behaving like this. How do you expect me to have respect for that person? Now, we're not talking about at no level does Gita say that you should indulge in ingenuous behavior. At no point of time do we say that, right? So Gita always says every single person in this world, every single situation in this world, every single VVGP will have positives and negatives, right? And it is our job कि हम अपना perception change करें, right? Our perception will be कि हर चीज जो नेगेटिव है हम उसको पकड़ के बैठ रहे हैं, कि हम जो पॉजिटिव चीजें हैं उसी चीज में उसको पकड़ के बैठ रहे हैं. वो हमारे पे डिपेंड करता है. Every VVGP will have positives and negatives, right? So हम किस चीज को पकड़ के बैठ रहे हैं tells me about my अंतःकरण. What is the status of my antakaran? If all I can see is negatives in people, and that's all I want to talk about, that's all I want to ruminate on, that's all that, so basically that's all that I am thinking about all the time. तो उसका कोई फायदा नहीं है, right? That just tells me it's not about what is wrong with that VVGP. It tells me what is wrong with me. कि मुझे सिर्फ नेगेटिव ही दिख रहा है, कि मैं नेगेटिव को ही सोचना चाहती हूँ. माई मेडिटेशन इज नेगेटिव. कितना तामसिक है मेरे अंदर, कितना तमस है. It tells me about that. And similarly, as the satvikta inside will rise, we move away from tamasic to rajasic and eventually to sattvic. Then same VVGPs में हमें positive चीजें दिखने लग जाएंगी. And then you hold on to the positives. And when we hold on to the positives in every VVGP, essentially we are holding on to the divine in each of those VVGPs rather than holding on to. So राम को पकड़ के रखो, रावण को छोड़ दो. हम लोग क्या करते हैं, हमारे अंदर अगर रावण है तो हम रावण को पकड़ के बैठ जाएंगे. बर्ड्स ऑफ अ फेदर फ्लॉक टुगेदर, लाइक अट्रैक्ट्स लाइक. अगर अंदर रावण है, हर जगह हमें बाहर रावण दिखेगा. अगर अंदर राम है, हर जगह राम दिखेगा. So that's chastity, non-injury related to chastity, where we should not hurt anybody through any of our actions of body, mind, or speech. So these are all forms of tap, physical tap, tap of the body. This is what is called tap of the body. And if when we do this, then all of the tap ki jo agni hai, it is going to purify us, cleanse us, and uh, take us towards a higher level of understanding, higher level of consciousness. We'll go to the austerity of speech. Rituj, you want to read to this?
Just to add one thing,
Mhm.
austerity of body, mind, and speech, if we think about it, one is so that austerity of the body results in our body becoming a temple, so that it becomes the right instrument for divinity to reflect itself. That is, and when that is reflected, it is reflected in our actions, in our karma. Everything we do, whether we do cooking, whether we do cleaning, whether we do office work, all our actions will reflect that divinity. That is the purpose of austerity of body. Austerity of speech, and we'll talk about that in detail, is so that people, when they experience us, they experience divinity. So that what we speak and what we say reflects and it compounds divinity every time we're in the room, every time somebody interacts with us. And austerity of mind is for us to experience divinity within us. And that is the reason why it's the third, is because that is the most important and that's the toughest to achieve. Once you achieve austerity of mind, your speech body will take care of itself. But it's easiest for us to see whether, oh, the action we're doing, whether it's in the right principle or no. With speech, it's easy for us to observe whether we practiced austerity. But with the mind, that's the toughest because that's unconscious, that's subconscious. It's going all the time. We don't have that awareness. Right? So that's why it's broken to these three levels. Now we can read connection.
Now the Lord speaks of the austerity of speech.
Anudvekakaram vakyam.
Anudvekaram vakyam.
Anudvekakaram vakyam.
Anudvegakaram vakyam.
Satyam priyahitam chayat.
Satyam priyahitam chayat.
Swadhyaya abhyasanam chaiva.
Vadhyaya abhyasanam chaiva.
Vangamayam tapa uchyate.
Vangamayam tapa uchyate. Speaking words which cause no annoyance and which are truthful, pleasant, and beneficial, and are also for scriptural study and recitation of the Lord's grace, of the Lord's glories, constitute austerity of speech. Austerity of speech. While practicing austerity of speech, words have to be used which cause no annoyance to anyone, either by their meaning or by their tone. Besides, speech has to be restricted to a statement of facts only, and that too in a way which is pleasant to hear, choosing words spoken with a sincere desire for the benefit of the listener. If austerity of speech is to be cultivated, there is no place for an unpleasant truth. Avoiding all unnecessary conversations, the spoken word has to be restricted only to essential conduct of business. Time so saved can be utilized for scriptural studies, recitation of Lord's glories, and chanting of his names. Austerity is an essential item of self-control needed for any yoga discipline. In austerity of speech, great emphasis is laid on truth, which has to be pleasant and also beneficial to the listener. Several religious texts also contain injunctions for welcoming unpleasant truth and for not reacting to them. But this is a discipline for the listener, and it in no way confers any privilege on the speaker. Thus, a person practicing austerity of speech speaks pleasantly and truthfully, and while listening to others, welcomes even unpleasant words with fortitude and cheer.
Okay. So austerity of speech में there are four gates through which we should pass through before we speak. So the most important thing about austerity of speech is कि पहले तो कम बोलो. हम लोग बोलते बहुत ज्यादा हैं और जब हम ज्यादा बोलते हैं it reflects what? It reflects an unstable or a very agitated mind. So first piece about austerity of speech is speaking less. Second is when we speak, तो क्या बोले? Only truth. Speak truth. Now, speaking truth is something that has been misused a lot. When people speak, फिर वो सच के नाम पे कुछ भी बोलते हैं and they hurt others a lot. So उसके लिए भगवान जी has said, okay, बोलो, सच बोलो, but how is important. So the next few gates come in there. So speak the truth, but only speak it when it is, and you speak it only for the ultimate welfare of the listener, for the benefit of the listener, not इसलिए कि हमारी भड़ास निकल जाए. राइट हम अपनी भड़ास निकालने के लिए जो सत्य बोलते हैं दैट इज नॉट कॉल्ड ऑस्टेरिटी ऑफ स्पीच. सो इट हैज टू बी सेड फॉर द बेनिफिट ऑफ द अदर पर्सन. थर्ड gate is it has to be spoken in a pleasant manner. So the words we choose to use and the tone of language have to be carefully chosen so that it does not annoy the other person. When we speak like this, then our speech actually lands. Our communication actually lands to the other person. And then the fourth thing is, even if all these three things are okay, you still have a fourth gate to pass. And that fourth gate is the timing. Is this the appropriate time to have this conversation that you're trying to have? You are speaking the truth for the ultimate welfare of the other person and you're careful about your language. But if the timing is not correct, the context is not correct, and you cannot wait for the right time and place for this communication, the communication will not land. Right? For you to have the most effective communication, you should also wait for the right time for it. सामने वाला गुस्सा है, उस टाइम पे आप ये सारी पहली तीन चीजें भी आप कर दो, it will not land because it's just not the right time. You have to wait for the person to calm down before you have that conversation, as an example, right? So these are the four gates that we must always pass through before we speak. And if you have to think about these four gates all the time before you speak, then you can imagine कि the quantity of time amount that the quantity of our speech itself will reduce, which is the most important thing in the first place. कि जब कम चीजों को you have to put through the litmus test anyway, you anyway will you have a higher chance of success.
So let me add here a few things. So one is, it is interesting to observe and reflect upon why we speak. And there are essentially two reasons why we speak. One is we want to be heard, or second, we want to be helpful. And the first part, which is when we want to be heard, what is the origination of that speech? The origination of that speech almost always is halchal within us. It is an emotion within us. It is a what's the word for halchal in English, Tuvina? It is a agitation within us. That agitation could be positive, it could be negative, it could be excitement, it could be anxiousness, it could be fear, it could be happiness. But it is not sambhav, it is emotion. Right? And for a lot of us with Rajoguni Bhav, especially that we are endowed with, it tends to stem more from anxiety and fears rather than happiness, because we are so worldly focused. So a lot of our speech stems from there, right? So what Tuina was referring to, and so when it stems from that emotion, that agitation, what are we looking for from the other person? We are looking for validation. So most of our speech is actually not helpful. It is for us to feel validation. And when we don't get it, it results in further emotion, whether it's anxiety, whether it's anger, whether it's something else. Right? So that's why there are so often breakdowns in communication, because each person is talking from emotion and each person is looking for validation for themselves. They're not really listening to each other. So in Gita, that is the very first starting point, that when we speak, right, we speak with purpose. So there is a idiom, right? It's called think before you speak. In the think, the T stands for am I speaking the truth? H, am I being helpful? I, what I'm speaking, does it inspire the other person towards their divinity? N, is it absolutely necessary for the other person to know this information? And K, is it kind? Am I able to say it in a kind way? If THIN is in place, but I cannot find the words to say it in a kind way to the other person, then I'm not ready to speak. Because I'm still speaking from my emotional irritation that I just want to tell you. So you have to churn it in yourself first to make it kind. That's Sagar Manthan, an example, right? Churning butter. Churn it inside. Churn it, churn it, churn it. Look at the same thing from 15 different perspectives. You'll find the kindness. Ha, Bhageshri.
Yeah, just a second. Sorry. So I was saying that you were saying that if we are looking for validation out of the emotion, if we are feeling any emotions and agitation and we are looking for validation, so that's a wrong thing, is it? If you're looking for validation?
Absolutely. It's not, I wouldn't say wrong. Wrong is not the word I use. It's ineffective. It's not the speech. It's not, you're not practicing austerity of speech based on this shloka.
But then how will my emotions be addressed if they are not validated?
Your emotions don't need, so in Gita, your emotions don't need to be addressed because you realize those are transient. That is the agitation of your mind that creates the emotions. We don't need to give emotions any more importance than just experiencing them and passing them through.
And more
Yeah,
importantly,
Tuna.
the validation is not the problem is when we seek validation from others. हम validation others की seek करते हैं जब हमारे पास अपनी खुद की validation नहीं है. So if we are seeking validation from others, the question we need to ask is what is inside of me that where I feel empty, and I need to address that within me. So it's important to get the validation, but वो validation दूसरों की नहीं, हमें अपनी validation पहले चाहिए. We can only fill our own abhav. No one
Yeah,
else can.
any form of validation, if you reflect on it a bit deeper, is a validation of sense of ego, which is what we need to move away from Gita. Right? But it's a valid point, Bhagishri. It's something for each of us to reflect upon because what happens internally for each of us is very different.
Yeah, because I mean, in counseling, therapy, or even while handling kids, they say that you should validate their or everyone's emotions, whatever they are feeling. So if I mean, I'm just saying that if it's wrong, then like, what's the solution? Then
No, there is not.
you said that uh, it is agitation of mind which we need to control.
So,
So you're confusing to, sorry, go on.
so there are two parts to this, right? There is when there is communication, there is a speaker and there is a listener. Hmm? What we have talked about thus far is the dharma or the tap of the speaker. So when we are the one speaking, then this is the tap we must go through. But if we are on the other side and we are the listener, तो हमारा तप different है. Tap we cannot control the other person. Then our tap is that the whatever, even if I am hearing unpleasant words, then it is my job to bear them with complete fortitude, with cheer, and try and understand what is the purpose or what is it that the other person is really trying to say. What can I learn from it? And how can I get better? Right? That is my dharma. And it is my dharma as a listener to provide validation if that is what the other person is requiring and it is correct, right? बच्चा है, बच्चा आपसे आके बात कर रहा है. As a parent, it is my job to understand his feelings and to provide him with a feeling of security, but at the same time, make sure that he does not become dependent on that validation, external validation. If I as a parent grow a child to become dependent on external circumstances and external validation, then I'm not doing the right dharma. I have to make sure that the child learns the principles and gets his validation from Gita, not from
So
others. Does that
I
make
think there is,
sense?
no, it does, Tuna. It makes a lot of sense, but I will not use the word validation. I think validation is a very, it's a very like culturally very accepted word, but it's not the right word in this context. The right word here is containment. We never have to validate other people and their emotions because validation is like telling them, yeah, you should be feeling XYZ because this scenario happened. That is not validation. That is validation, but that is not what we do. We cannot sympathize with people, we empathize with people. We've talked about this in the past. So what we need to practice in our speech when we listen to others is containment. And containment means understanding or empathizing with that other person's worldview of knowing, you, yes, Vedant, somebody stole your pencil. I can fully imagine how frustrating or angry you must be. All right. And he's like, I understand that. I hear you. What would you like to do from here on? Just help him think it through for himself on his own action points, on his own thinking. But that is containment because this individual that is speaking is cannot contain their emotions, which is why they're telling you. If they could contain the emotion within themselves, there's no need for speech.
Yeah, containment and acknowledgement, I think, is the right word. So that
And
the other
what
person feels
what
heard.
is it when I am the speaker and I am looking for validation? So you gave the example of Vedant where he was the speaker and you were the listener, and you gave the example of how what you will tell him. What if I am the speaker and looking for validation? then what
So,
should be my thinking?
so when I'm unable to contain my emotions myself, right? I will go to Tuhina or anyone else and I'll be like, look, I'm feeling really upset because of XYZ reason. And but I say it in a way which is reflective rather than in a way that is aggressive, right? And I will also then highlight that I can see why the other side is also right, or I can see why the other side is so right, but I feel very strongly about this. And then if we get into an argument, then I'll always tell Tuna, I need you to contain me. That's it. I know I'm being illogical, but I feel this emotion. And then she hears me. And that's all
Understood.
she
Okay.
is,
Okay.
right? So we're not giving emotion the life of validation. She's not telling me, yeah, Vinay, you're right. Yeah, wo. She may have a different perspective, but she just contains me in that moment. And a day later or 2 days later, we are able to both see the perspective differently or situation with different perspectives. Now, I'm not saying we do that perfectly. We still have breakdowns, but that's part of our journey till we reach that stage of complete mental where that agitation doesn't come up at all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Bhagishri, are you actually able to read with us? Do you want to read Shloka 16?
Sorry, I cannot read right now. I'm a bit unwell, so I'm just lying down.
Okay.
Um,
So, Prem, it comes on you then, round robin.
Rituj, no? Rituj read?
Huh?
Rituj read? Oh, he read, okay.
He just read, no?
Connection. Speaking about austerity of the mind, Lord says,
Mana prasada saumyatvam
Mana prasada somatyam
maunamatma vinigraha
Maunamatma vinigraha
bhava samshuddhirityetat
Bhavasam Shrudri Ritityam
rityetat
Rityetat
tapomana samuchyate.
Tapomana Samuchyate. Buoyancy and serenity of the mind, retience, mental restraint, and purity of the heart. These compromise austerity of the mind. Austerity of the mind. Buoyancy is the first of the qualities enumerated above, which is easily cultivated by keeping the mind clear of impure thoughts. Fortitude in trying situations and gratitude for pleasant ones greatly help in keeping the mind buoyant. For serenity, evenness of the mind is necessary. The natural function of the mind is to contemplate. Keeping the mind clear of negative thoughts like malice, anger, and vindictiveness helps in maintaining the serenity of the mind. The third quality is reticence. Generally, reticence is associated with silence. If the mind is kept in check from reacting too easily, reticence becomes established. The fourth quality is mental restraint. The natural tendency of the mind is to run in whichever directions the senses pull it. This tendency can be kept in check if the intellect imposes its authority on the mind and does not allow it to be swayed by the likes and dislikes. It is then compelled to follow and dictates of the propriety and becomes free from the pull of the senses. The fifth quality is the purity of heart. This is achieved by keeping the emotions in check and not allowing them to be tainted by impure thoughts.
Do you want me to go? You want to go?
Yeah, you can go.
Okay. So there are five elements that I mentioned here, right? And I think this shloka and the previous shloka, all three of these austerities are very important for us to reflect upon deeper, right? Each one has a tremendous amount of weight and depth and can be life changing if you actually focus on implementing it. So the first quality here mentioned is buoyancy. Buoyancy basically means the ability for the mind to float. Why is that word or example given? It's because in our life, with the VVGPs that we have around us, it is very easy for our mind to get involved in everything. Just like today, we will find that our mind gets distracted very easily. You sit on one reel on an Instagram, and next thing you know, you've spent 45 minutes, right? So many people nowadays go to the washroom and they're just there for such a long period of time, right? And all of this is what? Your mind, instead of training your mind to be buoyant, to move above your VVGPs, we are not doing the opposite by allowing it to get involved in absolutely useless activities. So we are actually,
I would use the word bogged down. Buoyancy is the ability to rise up and float up to what? Rise up above the VVGPs. So it is not bogged down. If your mind is not buoyant, then you're going to get bogged down by VVGPs. You will get completely involved in them, and then you're going to be fully like immersed. You're not able to rise above the VVGPs to be able to see कि यार मेरा धर्म क्या है इसमें, मुझे क्या करना है, and
yeah.
what path should I take, how should I behave. I have no ability to do that because I'm completely bogged down. And socho, like, like VVGP is this water. If you are like deep inside it, there is no way for you to like, dictate anything or like have any control or have any level of like foresight as to how you should be behaving. There's no control there over your mind. Then VVGPs are dictating you. When the mind is buoyant, then it rises up to the surface. Okay, it
And,
rises above the VVGP. It is not held down by the vines of likes and dislikes. It sits up there and is able to then see, okay, now I have this vantage point where now I have the clarity to think कि इस VVGP में मुझे how should I be acting? What is my dharma? And what should I do?
and one of the big reasons why you get bogged down is because of attachment to outcome, right? So every time you feel you're getting bogged down, you have to be aware what you're becoming attached to.
And the vines of likes and dislikes. Being a slave to our likes and dislikes is one of the key things that bogs our mind down.
And the more bogged down your mind is, the higher its tendency for having negative and impure thoughts. It's like a vicious cycle. Gita is constantly a vicious cycle, right? The second element, which is serenity and evenness of mind, right? Of
Sorry,
course,
one thing. Sorry. Before we end the buoyancy part. So, how do you cultivate buoyancy of mind? Through two very simple activities. One, and the most important thing that we must cultivate and we must develop a practice of doing it on a daily basis is gratefulness. Gratefulness exercise on a daily basis is an absolute must for all of us. Gratefulness is one of the highest frequencies to be on. And when we are in a state of gratefulness, it is okay. The highest is love, but the second highest is gratefulness. And it's something that we can constantly, once we are in state of gratefulness, love automatically flows through us. So every single day, 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes at night before we sleep, all we need to do is to like, count the things that we are grateful for, count the people we are grateful for, and just simply give that gratefulness. Just give thank you for all the things that we are grateful for. Grateful for the bed that we've just slept in and that gave us such good sleep, right? Grateful for the house in which we are living, which gives us a safe space to be. Gratefulness for the car or the mode of transport that transports us around, right? Gratefulness for all kinds of things. Gratefulness for the food, gratefulness for the people in our lives who make our lives so easy. So, just gratefulness can just flow through. When you start with the biggest of the things, you start to see when you get into a space of gratefulness, like you will start to see so many things that you are grateful for. It is never ending. And then you realize, my goodness, how many things I'm grateful for in life. Completely changes the frequency of mind. So that should be the way we start our day, and that's just the way we end our day. When we are in that space, our mind will remain buoyant. And the second thing is, if there are difficult situations, then we should need to have that fortitude. That जो भी आता है, it comes for our best interest. और आया है तो जाएगा भी. There's nothing permanent in this world. With that attitude, we bear it with cheerfulness. And again, even in that situation, being grateful, finding things to be grateful for. As I said, every VVGP will have positives and negatives. So if you're feeling certain negative aspects, find the positives of that and find a way to be grateful for it. Voice it. It increases the buoyancy of mind. Okay. Abhinav, you can go with serenity and evenness.
So serenity out here is reflects evenness of mind, right? Serenity is another way for you to know whether your mind is equanimous or not, right? And for your mind to be equanimous, as Tulina mentioned earlier, one is gratefulness needs to exist. But the second thing that needs to exist, which we do not practice enough, is forgiveness. Without practicing forgiveness, you are allowing the VVGP, which is not negative, which is negative, to stick onto you. And that is what takes away from your sambhav. That is what results in biasnesses coming up. And we used our past experience as a way to say, no, my experience is this, so the world is this. Right? And that takes us away from our natural function of the mind, which is to contemplate and reflect on everything. We use it to contemplate and reflect for only our purpose or our material purpose. Right? So to practice serenity, you have to have gratefulness and you have to practice forgiveness. Without that, you will never get there. Right? The third, sorry.
Yeah, forgiveness, if you have to visualize, right? Forgiveness is okay. I think one of the visual examples we had, which always helps me in these situations is, our soul is this, our soul is like this helium filled balloon, and it is constantly looking to rise up. And then we put the weights down. These weights are, weights associated with attachments, all kinds of attachments, the likes, the dislikes, the negative things that are inside of us, the negative qualities or feelings. These all weigh it down. As we cut each of these things, the balloon starts to float up, right? So think of forgiveness as that kanchi. It is that scissors that is going to cut those weights away, what is bogging you down. Forgiveness is that scissor to cut those strings, which is keeping you down. Very, very, very important. Like Abhinav said, we cannot, the amount of baggage we will carry with us if we do not practice forgiveness on a daily basis is ridiculous. And after a point, we will never be able to move forward. जो आ रहा है उसको जाते रहने दो. It allows us to flow with life. It allows us to flow through various experiences of life without them affecting us, without them sticking onto us and making us heavier and heavier and heavier. Forgiveness allows us to become lighter. You just leave things behind and you move on, move on, move on, move on. Make sense?
The third thing, which is reticence, best way to practice this is silence. And the best way to observe this is when we speak, we sometimes, very often repeat ourselves. We say the same thing 2 or 3 times, right? And then we justify, because the other person didn't get it. And sometimes when we speak, if you observe, we are trying to speak every single thought in our mind to the other person. When we try and share an experience, we will try and share every single element of that experience because you're reliving it in your mind, so you keep speaking, right? this is where silence is very important, because without restraint, without silence, you can never think. And thinking is what we need to be able to speak. Think, when I say think, I mean truth. Whether are we speaking the truth? Are we being helpful? Are we inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? If we're not passing speech through these gates, then we're not practicing restraint. We're not practicing reticence. Would you like to add something?
No, otherwise I will not be reticent.
I knew that joke was coming.
साल का कोटा हो गया.
Okay. The fourth quality is mental restraint. So, mental restraint is the word that we used earlier was containment, right? It's about containing what you're thinking, why you're thinking. And the only way to do it is by having intellect in the driver's seat. The intellect directing and redirecting the mind. Otherwise, without the intellect, your mind will reign free as your senses experience pleasure and displeasure. Yeah. So every time your mind feels agitated, just become aware. It's because you've either let attachment, likes and dislikes take over, or you let your mind reign free with senses. Your intellect disappeared. You switched it off. Yeah. And the fifth quality is purity of heart. And this comes back to Bhageshwari's point, which is keeping your emotions in check. When we speak with kindness and love. It needn't be tainted with the other emotions which we feel, which is very natural for us to feel in this body, as we have given this body for. Yeah. All right. Should we do takeaways? To It's 11:42. Let's do takeaways.
I'll go.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'll go first. I think today's class was very beautiful. I enjoyed it immensely. Um, I learned a lot about like think before you speak, speak less, focus on these important gateways and the austerity and the path. There was a lot of beautiful takeaways from that, and I think it's a lot of me to reflect and try to implement this also on a daily basis. And also the 2 minute grateful thing before you go to bed and when you wake up. I think that's also very beautiful and something I will try to do every day from today. Thank you.
For me, my takeaways I want to implement about my perception and how what I focus on in every situation that I face, looking at the positive and how it's a reflection of what's going on in my current state within. That is what I'm perceiving outside and taking from there. So if I am focusing too much on the negative, that means I'm in that negative mindset and the negative frame of thought. So I pray that I'm able to convert that and focus on the positive, and that's something that I want to practice and implement. And about the austerity of speech of the four gates of speech is something I also want to focus on, and that the speaking less bit, the truth, and how what kind of truth, which has to be for the ultimate welfare and benefit of the person and in a pleasant manner, and the timing. So these two takeaways I want to focus on.
I can go
I-
next. Yeah.
no, sorry, please
Um,
go ahead, Naina. Yeah.
no, you can go, Bhagyashree. It's okay.
No, it's okay, Naina.
So, for me, austerities, I think we were mostly focused on the physical part and that of speech and I think speech and mind. That I thought that would be secondary, but like Abhinav said, the one of the body is more gross and it's easier, but speech and mind is the most difficult part, and it was like peeling an onion, different layers of each uh, austerity and. Mainly about speech, what I found interesting was your dharma of as a speaker and a listener are different. It would mostly overlap for me, so now I have to understand where what is my dharma as a speaker and as a listener. So that was interesting. That was my takeaway from that of speech. And of course, buoyancy of the mind is what keeps you afloat in this situation. I think what gives you the perspective of what is your dharma and what you're supposed to do in any situation. So that's where the focus lies for me. Thank you.
I can go next. So austerity is one of the 26 qualities which we want to manifest ideally within us, right? And learning about austerity of mind and speech in today's class, it felt like these are really practical points which can help us a lot in our daily life. Um, One thing, I mean, the first thing is that if I'm seeing only negatives in a person or in my situation in VBGP, then I have a lot of tamas within myself. Um, because obviously everyone has some positives and some negatives. That's the thing that even I have the same thing, right? So I think I should focus more on seeing the positives in the situations and not focus on the negatives. Um, that is one thing where I mean we see what whatever we see outside of us, that is the thing which is inside of us. I mean, so yeah, we need to first address those things inside of us. Um, that is first thing. And then austerity of speech. I i remember that this has happened in one of the earlier chapters about these things which we talked about: speaking less, speaking truth, and speaking in a pleasant manner where words and tones should be chosen. But I had forgotten about these things. So yeah, this I now know that I need to do a lot of self-learning to remember and implement whatever we have learned till now and whatever we will keep learning. So that's the thing. And I need to again think a lot, um, reflect about about the question which I asked about validation and containment, which you explained, Abhinav. So I'll just think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just say one thing, right? Like all of Gita, if you observe, Arjun constantly asks about what to do, what to do, what to do. And Bhagwanji keeps getting him back and saying how to be, how to be, how to be. If you be ABC, you will experience XYZ. If you be DEF, you'll experience LMN, right? So it's all about how to working on our own being. That is it. That's our core focus.
Oh yeah, nice. That's nice. Thank you.
So, closing shlokas. Any
We have
volunteers?
10 minutes. Do you want to do one last shloka?
हाँ, कर सकते. We do have 10 minutes. कर सकते. करें?
After the closing, because जल्दी जल्दी हो गया ना सबका वो सब.
हाँ, कोई questions भी नहीं. चलो, okay, 17 कर लेते हैं.
Kirnena, will you read with us?
I can also read if earlier I said no, but I think I'm okay now.
Okay, if you feel like, chalo, let's read.
Yeah.
Start with the
Um,
connections.
yeah. The austerities mentioned above relate to body, speech, and mind so that they may function as effective instruments for the performance of duties. The Lord now tells how their functioning is influenced by the three types of faith and how the austerity of the body, speech, or mind serves as an index of the faith which influences them.
This is a very, very important and a good shlok to end the class on. Shraddhaya paraya taptam
Shraddhaya paraya taptam
tapa tatrividham naraihe
tapa tatra trividham naraihe
अफलाकांक्षिभिर्युक्त है
अफलाकांक्षिभिर्युक्तः
सात्विकं परिचक्षते.
सात्विकं परिचक्षते. When these three austerities are undertaken as strict disciplines with supreme conviction by steadfast persons who do not hanker for enjoyment of results, they are spoken of as being sattvic. Sattvic austerities. The austerity of the body, speech, or the mind is said to indicate a sattvic faith if it satisfies the following conditions: strictness of discipline. The aspirant observes strictness in practicing the discipline of austerity, unmindful of any worldly gain or loss or of any inconvenience. Supreme conviction. Austerity is practiced steadfastly with a firm conviction that in its practice lies the ultimate welfare and attainment of the supreme gain of life, self realization. On account of this conviction, the practice never falters. Steadfastness. The aspirant has to be steadfast in practice and undaunted by any reverses, not hankering for results. The aspirant is not to be guided by considerations of pleasant or unpleasant results, being concerned only with performance of all duties dedicatedly and assiduously.
So this shloka is important because it explains to us we should how should we actually end up practicing what we've just read, right? The austerities of mind, speech, body. What we are being told here is, one is that there has to be strictness of discipline, right? You must practice the discipline unmindful of any inconveniences, unmindful of any worldly gain. And how do you do that strictness, right? Now, on one side, we are saying that it has to be strict, right? The person will do it on a very strict basis. But you will naturally have reverses, right? There are cases when you may not be able to practice it. When you walked back after your 10 steps forward, 2 steps backwards, then Bhagwan Ji says it has to be steadfast in practice and you should be undaunted by any such reverses. These reverses are part and parcel of your practice. Just stay steadfast, don't kill yourself, go back on the path. As soon as you fall, get back up. You fall down, get back up. That's how a child learns to walk, right? So steadfast. Now the point is, how will I remain strict with this discipline and how will I remain steadfast like this? And why will I do that? It comes from supreme conviction. It comes from the conviction that the austerity that I practice, the tap I practice of, say, not drinking alcohol or not eating non-veg or not eating pyaz or this thing, whatever inconveniences are being imposed on me, because I used to do all of this as part of my life. And now suddenly you're asking me to, like, change the way I eat, the way I think, the way, all of those things, right? Said the only reason I would change myself is if I have supreme conviction that practice of these austerities is where my ultimate welfare lies. That steadfast conviction, supreme conviction that my ultimate welfare lies in this, even if I don't see it on a day-to-day basis. तब फिर somebody else comes and tells me, अरे यार ठीक है, it's okay. You are like not drinking at all. Just have one drink for this one party, right? Or like it's okay, yaar, you don't have to be that silly about these things, right? When people push you to go away, and I'm just giving you examples of what I experience, more this thing, but in every other aspect, right? Let go. When people say, no, just let go, yeah, it's okay. You need to be a little bit more relaxed in life. I think you're too hard on yourself. You'll hear all of these conversations from people around us who are deluded when you are on this path, right? So when you hear these things, what will keep you back on the path, what will prevent you from slipping, is this conviction that what I am doing is for my ultimate welfare. If this practice is what is going to make sure that I stay clean, I stay pure, it increases my purity. And every time I say no and I stand up against the temptations of the world, in every such moment that I walk away from those temptations, my mind is getting strengthened. In every such moment, my poor habits are getting broken. I'm facing these issues, I'm facing such people who are coming and constantly tempting me away is because of my antakaran only. My antakaran is attracting that conversation because मेरा antakaran abhi unclean hai. When my antakaran becomes cleansed enough, once I've shown consistently by choosing one over the other, then these temptations will die away. So that conviction is extremely important कि यही मेरे सही, यही मेरे लिए सबसे अच्छा है और यही करने से ही मेरा आगे उद्धार होगा ना, नहीं होगा. I'll get stuck in this world with what, with my own actions, my own choices, no one else. And then finally not hankering after results कि अब अरे I gave up egg for like a whole month, I don't see a result in myself. What did you tell me? You told me that, if I give up non-veg, then, I should reduce my violent प्रवृत्ति. मेरे अंदर violence कम होनी चाहिए. 1 महीना हो गया, 3 महीने हो गए, 6 महीने हो गए, हम तो नहीं change हुए. I'll go back to eating non-veg. Don't hanker after results. You for example, this whole thing about like, violence in ourselves. हम लोग सब बोलते world peace, world peace, world peace, world peace. करते क्या है on a daily basis? Supremely violent. We are violent in our actions, we are violent in our behavior, we are violent in our thoughts, we are violent in our speech. And फिर हम world peace बोलते हैं. World peace कहाँ से आएगी when we are violent on a daily basis in our own worlds? So, for our biggest contribution to world peace is not getting upset about Israel and what's happening at Gaza Strip. Our biggest contribution to world peace is changing ourselves and becoming peaceful inside out ourselves. Leaving violence in our thoughts, in our words, in our speech, in our actions is what is going to contribute greatly to this world peace. So so for this violence, right? So giving up or doing the tap of the food that we eat is one aspect of it. But just leaving that and then saying, Arey, 6 mahine se I've not done this, but I have not become any more peaceful than I was before, just means that there are other things that are holding you down. Doesn't mean that you go back to this. It just means find other things why you're still continuing to be violent, right? There may be 5 things that are holding me down. I have to cut all 5 of them for me to float up free, right? So not hankering after short-term results and just knowing that if I keep doing things right, long-term, I will reach my ultimate welfare. Pleasantness, unpleasantness, these are all experienced. It's pleasant and unpleasant, convenient or inconvenient is experienced at the level of body. We have to rise above that. Feeling of pleasure, happiness, pain, that happens at the mental level. We have to rise above that too. And that allows us to be able to stay on a long-term path. सो कन्विक्शन इज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग. अगर वो कन्विक्शन नहीं है ना हमारे अंदर कि व्हाट गीता इज टेलिंग मी विल लीड मी टू माय अल्टीमेट वेलफेयर, अगर हमें लगता है कि आई कैन रीच मोक्ष विदाउट, और आई कैन रीच ultimate happiness and I can hold on to that ultimate happiness long term without changing myself, without giving up alcohol, without giving up anger, without giving up judgment, तो we are deluded. नहीं होगा, होगा ही नहीं, होगा ही नहीं. ये कन्विक्शन होना चाहिए आपको, ये सब लीव करना ही है for you to really have आत्म साक्षात्कार, for you to really stand in front of your own divinity and say okay I am him. तत्वम असी का एक्सपीरियंस तभी होगा जब ये सब चीजें छूटेंगी. एंड एवरी टाइम आई से नहीं आई कांट लीव दिस, देयर इज एन अटैचमेंट होल्डिंग मी डाउन, एंड इट्स अ क्वेश्चन फॉर अस टू आस्क कि ये क्या है, व्हाट इज दिस अटैचमेंट, आई नीड टू एक्सप्लोर व्हाट इज टाइंग मी डाउन. Yeah. And on that note, we will close this class unless we have any questions about this particular topic.
Should we, who would like to do closing shlokas? Any volunteers? Or else? All right. मैं ही कर लेता हूँ. ॐ सर्वेषां स्वस्तिर्भवतु, सर्वेषां शान्तिर्भवतु, सर्वेषां पूर्णं भवतु, सर्वेषां मङ्गलं भवतु. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्. ॐ असतो मा सद्गमय, तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय, मृत्योर्मामृतं गमय. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. ॐ पूर्णमद पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते, पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. ॐ ॐ